Choose carefully, the high priest warned, his voice carrying through the royal hall like distant thunder. Some mistakes wear crowns for years. The grand hall of Ravenspire Palace glittered with crystal chandeliers, polished marble, and enough candlelight to imitate sunrise, yet nothing about the room felt warm. Nobles lined the walls in tailored black coats, jeweled gowns, and sharpened smiles. Every powerful family in the kingdom had come to witness one moment. Tonight, Alpha King Adrian Ravenscroft would choose the woman who would stand beside him. At the center of the hall, daughters of noble blood waited in silk and perfume, their hands graceful, their eyes calculating. Elena Hartwell stood nowhere near them. She remained beside the last marble column at the edge of the room, half hidden by shadow and taller people. Her dress was midnight blue, simple and years old, carefully repaired at the hem. No diamonds touched her throat. No maid had dressed her hair. She had braided it herself in the mirror of a quiet house where no one expected miracles anymore. She should have felt embarrassed. Instead, she felt strangely free. Forgotten women were allowed to breathe. "You still came," murmured her cousin Lydia, glancing over with elegant pity. "That is brave. Or optimistic." Elena gave a small smile. "Neither." Across the room, Celeste Munro moved through candlelight like it had been invented for her alone. Gold silk flowed behind her. Pearls shone at her throat. Laughter followed wherever she turned. Men straightened when she passed. Mothers whispered hopeful prayers. Celeste already looked like a queen in a painting. Then the doors opened. No herald announced him. None was needed. Conversation died in waves. Adrian Ravenscroft crossed the upper platform in a dark tailored coat lined with grey velvet, tall and composed, carrying the stillness of a storm before it breaks. He was handsome in the severe way winter mountains were beautiful. Dark hair. Silver eyes. A face disciplined into calm. He acknowledged bows with the slightest nod and took his place beneath the moon crest of the throne. Elena lowered her gaze too late. For the smallest breath, she thought. His eyes had found hers. Impossible. The high priest lifted the ceremonial moonstone blade, pale light spilling across the chamber. "Name the one who will share your burden, your crown, and your winters." Adrian descended the steps slowly. Every woman in the center seemed to stop breathing. He passed the first row. Then the second. He paused near Lady Marlowe. Moved on. Celeste Munro's smile deepened before he even reached her. Elena told herself she did not care. She had never been foolish enough to imagine being chosen. Yet when Adrian passed within a few feet of her, something deep inside her chest stirred like a locked door opening in the dark. His gaze flickered toward her hand, where an old silver ring rested against her finger. Then he turned away. He offered his hand to Celeste. Applause crashed through the hall. Celeste placed her fingers in his with practiced grace, radiant and victorious. Courtiers cheered. Musicians struck triumphant notes. Lydia exhaled, relieved to have backed the right woman all along. Elena heard none of it clearly. In the same instant Adrian touched Celeste's hand. Every candle flame in the room bent sharply east. A freezing wind swept through sealed windows. The chandeliers trembled. And above the palace, the ancient iron bells began to ring by themselves. Once. Twice. Then again and again, loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The high priest went pale. Adrian's jaw tightened. Celeste's smile faltered for the first time in years. Elena stood motionless beside the last column, heart pounding for reasons she did not understand. Slowly she slid the old silver ring from her finger and closed it inside her palm. The bells rang for 7 full minutes. Their iron voices rolled across Ravenspire Palace, through towers, gardens, and sleeping streets below, until even the oldest nobles looked unsettled. No servant touched the ropes. No priest spoke a blessing. Yet when the final echo faded into the winter night, the court did what courts always do. They smiled harder. They applauded louder. They pretended nothing had happened. Celeste Munro stood at King Adrian Ravenscroft's side while attendants fastened the silver sash of royal favor across her shoulders. She accepted every stare as if admiration were an inheritance. Noblewomen rushed forward with polished congratulations. Lords bowed with careful enthusiasm. Musicians played brighter, faster, louder. Elena Hartwell remained beside the last column until the crowd flowed around her like water around stone. No one asked whether she was cold. No one asked whether she wished to leave. "You handled that well," Lydia said, appearing beside her once more. "Some women would have embarrassed themselves." Elena opened her palm and looked at the plain silver ring resting there. The metal was warm from her skin. Her mother had once called it a promise, and then refused to explain of what. Elena closed her fingers over it. "Then I am relieved to disappoint quietly," she said. Lydia blinked, surprised by steel hidden in a soft voice. Across the hall, Adrian lifted a crystal glass while Celeste leaned near enough to whisper something that made nearby nobles laugh. He smiled in return, but the expression seemed borrowed rather than felt. Then, for the briefest moment, his eyes moved across the room as if searching for something misplaced. Elena stepped behind two passing footmen before his gaze could find her. She did not know why that mattered now. Outside, the palace terrace greeted her with clean, biting air. Snow dusted the stone balustrades. Beyond them, the capital stretched in lantern-lit streets and white rooftops, beautiful from a distance, less kind up close. Music spilled from the open doors behind her, warm and bright and belonging to another life already closing. She descended the eastern stair alone. Her heels clicked across marble, then softened on gravel paths lined with sleeping rose bushes. At the outer gate, two guards straightened in surprise. "Miss Hartwell," one said, "shall we call for an escort?" Elena offered a tired smile. "No need. Home is less than a mile." They let her pass because no one stops a woman who appears to have nowhere important to go. The Hartwell townhouse stood on the quieter side of the city where old family names remained after fortune had not. Most windows were dark. Her father would already be asleep or pretending to be. Elena entered silently, climbed the narrow stairs, and closed the door to her room. Then she stood still in the center of it, listening to the silence after so much noise. On the desk lay unfinished letters, dried lavender, and a folded map of the northern provinces she had once studied for no reason she could name. She opened the wardrobe and took only what necessity respected: a travel cloak, sturdy boots, 2 dresses, bandages, a healer's handbook, and the little money she had saved coin by coin. Nothing from the life that had failed to notice her absence. At last she sat and wrote one sentence on cream paper. "You already chose not to see me." She left the note where morning light would find it. Before dawn touched the rooftops, Elena Hartwell walked out through the market road with a satchel over one shoulder and snow beginning to fall. Behind her, Ravenspire still slept beneath towers of stone and pride. Ahead of her, the road vanished into white. By the third night, the king had stopped sleeping. Ravenspire Palace knew it before the council did. Servants moved faster when he passed. Doors opened sooner. Conversations ended the moment his footsteps entered a corridor. Even the fireplaces seemed to burn more carefully in his presence. Adrian Ravenscroft sat at the long council table with untouched breakfast cooling beside him, eyes fixed on a map of the kingdom he had not truly seen for the last hour. Roads crossed in neat black lines. Trade routes curved through forests and ports. Every border was marked, every province named. Yet one absence filled the room more completely than any empire. "Your Majesty," Chancellor Merrick said gently, "the delegates from West Mir have arrived." Adrian did not answer. Beneath his ribs, the now familiar ache tightened again, sharp and sudden, like a hand closing around something vital. It had begun the morning after the choosing night. At first he had called it fatigue. Then stress. Then indigestion, which the royal physician had wisely pretended to consider. But pain that woke him before dawn and followed him through every chamber did not belong to medicine. "Your Majesty," Merrick tried again. Adrian looked up so quickly the older man froze. "Send them home. They traveled 200 miles. Then let them enjoy the return journey." Silence spread across the table. Ministers lowered their eyes. No one wished to be the next sentence in the room. Celeste Munro, seated in the Queen's chair beside him, set down her teacup with elegant precision. She wore pale blue silk today, flawless and composed. "You embarrass yourself when you brood," she said. Adrian's gaze moved to her, cool as winter glass. "Is that what this is?" "If you regret choosing me," Celeste replied, "practice hiding it better." A lesser man might have argued. Adrian simply stood. "I regret being interrupted." He left her there with the untouched tea and the sound of several careers quietly ending around the table. The upper terrace met him with hard wind and gray sky. Snow drifted across the stone rails. Far below, the city spread in white rooftops and chimney smoke. He should have felt satisfaction. The alliance with House Munro strengthened the throne. The court approved. Stability had been secured. Yet every victory now tasted strangely empty. A memory returned without invitation. Elena Hartwell near the last column in a midnight blue dress, saying little, asking nothing, carrying herself with a grace untouched by performance. He remembered noticing her in countless rooms because she never fought to be noticed at all. In libraries. In garden paths. Once kneeling to fix a servant child's torn glove while nobles stepped around them. He had seen her 100 times and called it nothing. He had mistaken constancy for background. Adrian gripped the cold stone rail. Since she left, he kept expecting to find her where quiet things belong. In corridors. By windows. At the edge of crowded rooms. Each time the absence struck fresh. "Captain Rowan," he said when the guard approached. "Now." Rowan arrived moments later, boots wet with snow. "Your Majesty." "Elena Hartwell. Where is she?" Rowan hesitated. "I do not know, sire." "Then no. The Hartwell house sent word this morning. Miss Hartwell departed before sunrise 2 days ago." The pain beneath Adrian's ribs turned fierce enough to steal breath. "Destination? None given. Companions? None known." Adrian's voice became dangerously calm. "Bring me every rider in the North Barracks. Search the roads, stations, crossings, and inns within 100 miles. Rowan bowed at once. "Yes, sire." He turned to leave, then paused. "Should I tell the council?" Adrian stared into the storm beyond the terrace. "Tell them the kingdom may continue panicking without me." As Rowan ran, the ancient palace bells began to ring again above the snow-dark towers. No ropes moved. No hands touched them. Adrian stood motionless beneath their echo, and for the first time in many years, the Alpha King understood fear. The royal riders returned by sunset with frozen cloaks, tired horses, and nothing useful to offer. They had searched the North Road, the river crossing, the market trail, and every coach station within 50 miles of Ravenspire. They brought back rumors, guesses, and apologies. None of them were Elena Hartwell. Adrian Ravenscroft listened from the throne without moving. The great hall felt colder than the storm outside. Torches burned low against stone walls draped in banners of old victories, their shadows shifting like uneasy thoughts. "Again," he said after the final captain finished. Captain Rowan bowed, jaw tight from exhaustion. "Your Majesty, fresh snow covers tracks within the hour." Adrian's silver gaze lifted. "Then leave before the next hour passes." No one argued. They knew the difference between anger and command. This was command sharpened by something worse. When the captains were dismissed, Celeste Munro descended from the side gallery where she had waited long enough to hear everything. She wore white silk tonight, the color of innocence and calculation. "You empty the barracks for one missing woman," she said. "The council is whispering." Adrian remained seated, one hand resting on the carved arm of the throne. "Then let them speak while they still have tongues for it." Celeste stopped at the foot of the dais. "Tomorrow we are meant to announce our engagement feast. Then announce it cancelled. Because Elena Hartwell walked away?" Her voice sharpened. She was nobody. The room changed in a single breath. Adrian rose slowly. The servants along the walls straightened as if pulled by strings. Choose your next sentence carefully, he said. Celeste held his gaze for one brave, foolish moment, then looked aside first. I meant no insult. You meant exactly what you said. He stepped past her without another glance. In the silence behind him, the future of House Monroe quietly cracked. Adrian crossed the private wing alone and entered the old records chamber, a forgotten library of ledgers, bloodlines, and ceremonial law. Dust lived here more faithfully than courtiers ever had. Shelves rose 40 feet toward a painted ceiling faded by time. He lit 3 lamps and searched without clear reason except instinct. Elena's name had begun to echo through his thoughts with the force of memory he had ignored too long. Hartwell. 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 Hours passed. At last he found an iron-bound volume sealed with the crest of the Moon clergy. Inside, between brittle pages, lay a sketch of a plain silver ring engraved with a faint crescent mark. Adrian's breath stilled. He knew that ring. He had seen it on Elena's hand the night he chose another woman. Beneath the sketch, old script read, "Given to the bloodline bound by moon oath. When the true pair stand divided, bells shall sound and fire shall bow." Adrian closed the book too quickly, sending dust into the lamplight. Impossible. Yet the bells had rung. The candles had bent. And the pain in his chest had grown each mile she traveled away from him. A soft movement sounded near the doorway. Celeste stood there, pale now, one hand gripping the frame. "True pair?" she whispered. Adrian did not answer. For the first time since choosing night, she looked less offended than afraid. "You knew nothing of this?" he asked. "No." Tears brightened her eyes, furious rather than tender. "Do you think I would accept being chosen second by fate?" She turned and left before dignity could fail her further. A knock followed almost at once. Rowan entered, snow on his shoulders. "Sire," a stable boy came forward. "He says Miss Hartwell bought bread, bandages, and a northbound map too." Mornings ago. Adrian was already reaching for his coat. Toward where? Frost Mir Road. Mountain villages. Few travel there in winter. Adrian fastened the black clasp at his throat. Then few will slow her. It is past midnight. Adrian strode for the door. Then we ride in darkness. As he left the chamber, every lamp in the corridor flickered one after another, as if something unseen had risen and gone with him. Snow fell in hard silver sheets as the royal convoy rode north through the last hours of darkness. Hooves struck frozen ground, breath steamed from horses, and lantern lights swayed across roads narrowed by drifting white. Adrian Ravenscroft led without complaint, though the cold cut through leather and wool alike. He welcomed it. Weather was easier to endure than the ache beneath his ribs. With every mile toward Frost Mir, that hidden pull tightened, as if some unseen thread stretched between him and the woman walking farther away. Captain Rowan urged his mount beside him. "Your Majesty, we should rest the horses within 10 miles. We rest when we find her. At this pace, we may lose riders in the pass." Adrian did not look back. "Then those who prefer comfort may return to the palace." No one turned around. Near dawn they reached Black Hollow Station, a weathered coaching inn leaning against the wind. Smoke rose thinly from one crooked chimney. Villagers gathered in the doorway when they recognized the royal crest. Some bowed. Others simply stared. Adrian dismounted before the stable boy could move. "A dark-haired woman," he said. "Traveling alone. About 5'6". Blue eyes. Carried a brown satchel." The innkeeper, a broad-shouldered woman with flour on her sleeves, studied him longer than most people dared. "You are one day late," she said. "Was she here?" Adrian asked. "Yesterday morning." Relief and shame arrived together. "Which road?" "That depends," the innkeeper replied. "Are you chasing her for yourself or for the throne?" Rowan stiffened. 2 guards reached for discipline in their posture. Adrian only removed one glove and laid it on the counter beside a purse of gold. "For myself," he said quietly. "Then keep your money," she answered. "She already paid us in kindness." Adrian looked at the purse, then back at her. Tell me what she did. The woman's expression softened by 1 degree. My grandson fell from the loft. Wrist swollen like an apple. She reset it, wrapped it, and stayed until he stopped crying. Adrian swallowed once. And the road? North Ridge Trail. She pointed through the frosted window. She walks fast when she wants distance. They rode at once. The ridge trail climbed through pine forest and stone ledges where snow concealed the edges of the world. By noon they found their first sign of her. A strip of midnight blue fabric fluttered from a branch. Rowan reached for it. Adrian stopped him. The cloth had been tied in a traveler's marker not used to warn others away from weak ice below. Even while leaving, Elena had guided strangers she would never meet. She was helping people, Rowan murmured. Adrian said nothing. Regret had become too constant for speech. An hour later they followed the wrong fork after fresh wagon tracks, only to find an abandoned quarry and wasted time. Adrian turned back without anger, which frightened Rowan more than fury ever had. Mid-afternoon brought a second sign. At a shepherd's hut above the ravine, a boy ran outside clutching a bundle of herbs. The healer lady said to steep these for father's cough, he announced proudly before noticing the royal crest. Adrian knelt to meet his eyes. Which way did she go? The boy pointed toward the mountain road. Toward White Mir village. I asked if she was a princess. And what did she say? The child grinned. She said no princess wears boots with holes. Adrian rose too quickly. Elena had crossed ice and stone in worn shoes while he had stood on heated marble believing himself burdened. By sunset they reached a high overlook where the world opened into valleys glazed white beneath a violet sky. Far below, smoke curled from a cluster of cottages beside a frozen lake. White Mir. The pull in Adrian's chest became so fierce he pressed a hand against it. Then, carried upward on the wind, came the sound of laughter. Not polished court laughter sharpened for advantage. Something softer. Real. Rowan watched his king's face change. Is it the village? Adrian stared into the deepening dusk. No, he said quietly. It is where she remembered how to live. White Mir village was smaller than Adrian Ravenscroft expected, no more than 30 cottages gathered around a frozen lake that reflected the fading sky like pale glass. Smoke curled from chimneys. Lanterns glowed behind frost-lined windows. There were no gates, no walls, no guards in polished armor. Yet the moment the royal riders entered the narrow road, doors opened and people stepped outside one by one. Bakers with flour still on their sleeves. Woodcutters carrying tools. Mothers with children tucked close beneath wool blankets. They formed a quiet line across the street, not with anger, but with certainty. Captain Rowan urged his horse forward. Stand aside for the king. No one moved. Adrian lifted one hand and Rowan fell silent at once. An elderly man in a thick brown coat stepped from the line. His beard was white with snow, his shoulders bent by years rather than fear. We know who you are, he said. Then you know I seek one woman, Adrian replied. We know that too. Adrian dismounted slowly. His boots touched packed snow. The villagers watched him not as subjects watched a ruler, but as people measured a stranger. Where is Elena Hartwell? He asked. A young mother near the front tightened the scarf around her child and answered first. Safe. Another voice rose from somewhere behind her. Warmer than she was in your palace. Murmurs followed, not cruel, only honest. Adrian had faced councils, rivals, and battlefields without flinching. Nothing struck like truth spoken by those with nothing to gain. She helped my son through winter fever, said the mother. She repaired my roof after the storm, said a carpenter. She taught my daughter letters by candlelight, said another. She sat with my wife when she passed, the old man said softly. No priest could reach us in time. Elena did. Each sentence landed heavier than accusation. The woman he had overlooked in his kingdom had become shelter in another corner of it. Adrian looked down the lane toward a modest cottage near the lake where warm light glowed through linen curtains. The pull beneath his ribs led there so sharply it nearly staggered him. I am not here to take from you, he said. I am here because I was wrong. The villagers exchanged glances. Some faces softened. Most did not. The old man studied Adrian for a long moment. Kings often arrive when they need forgiveness, he said. Rarely when they need to earn it. Adrian nodded once. Then tell me how. Before the elder could answer, the cottage door opened. Conversation died like a candle in wind. Elena stepped onto the porch carrying a basket of folded linens. She wore a cream sweater beneath a dark cloak, plain gloves, and boots dusted white at the toes. Her hair was loosely braided now, a few strands moving in the cold breeze. She looked healthier than he had ever seen her. Stronger, too. Color touched her cheeks. Peace stood beside her like something chosen. She saw the riders first, then Rowan, then Adrian. The basket slipped only an inch before her grip steadied. For one breath either moved. Adrian had imagined this moment across every mile of road. He had prepared apologies, explanations, promises. None survived the sight of her. Elena set the basket carefully on the porch rail. You found the wrong road, she said, her voice calm enough to shame the storm inside him. Adrian took one step forward and stopped when three villagers quietly moved between them. Elena raised a hand. They stepped back at once. Trust had made her powerful where crowns never could. She descended the steps slowly until she stood 10 feet away. Why are you here, Adrian? She asked. Snow gathered on his shoulders. He did not brush it away. Because nothing has been warm since you left. Her gaze did not soften. Then perhaps you should have noticed winter before it walked out your door. The wind moved softly across the frozen lake, carrying wood smoke and the faint creak of ice. No one in White Mir spoke. Even the horses seemed to understand that something larger than rank or title stood in the center of the village road. Adrian Ravenscroft held Elena Hartwell's gaze and felt, perhaps for the first time in his life, how little a crown could do for him. I deserve that, he said quietly. And more. Elena folded her gloved hands before her. Then you have traveled far for honesty. A few villagers smiled at that. Adrian did not. I traveled because I could not breathe in rooms that once felt like home. Regret always sounds elegant in a king's mouth, Elena replied. It costs him nothing. Captain Rowan shifted behind him, uncomfortable, but Adrian raised a hand without looking back. What would it cost, then? He asked. Her blue eyes rested on him with calm precision. The truth. Snow touched her braid and shoulders. She did not seem to notice. Did you choose her because you loved her? Adrian answered at once. No, did you choose her because she strengthened your alliances? Yes. Did you know it would humiliate me? The pause that followed was brief, but enough. Elena nodded before he could speak. There is the truth. Adrian felt each word like cold steel laid carefully against bone. I told myself you did not care. That was convenient. I know. You mistook my silence for emptiness. Her voice never rose, which somehow made it sharper. You miss what served you, not what you knew. The villagers remained still, witnesses to a trial with no judge but conscience. Adrian stepped closer, stopping several feet away. I did not know the bells would ring. I did not know the bond would tear through me when you left. I did not know how often I had looked for you in every room before I realized I was searching. Elena's expression changed only slightly, but enough for sorrow to flicker beneath composure. You noticed after I was gone. Yes. That is not romance, Adrian. That is loss. The words landed with clean precision. He bowed his head once, accepting them. From the porch, a little girl no older than 7 peeked from behind the railing, clutching a knitted rabbit. She looked at Elena, then at Adrian. Is he the man who made you sad? She asked in a whisper loud enough for everyone to hear. Heat rose in Adrian's face despite the freezing air. Elena glanced back at the child. He is the man deciding what kind of man he wishes to be. The girl considered this gravely and disappeared inside again. A quiet laugh moved through the crowd, warm and brief. Adrian almost smiled. I came to ask you to return, he said. No, Elena answered. The certainty of it stunned even Rowan. You did not let me finish. You were finished the night you chose appearances over truth. Adrian drew a slow breath. Then I came to ask for the chance to become someone who would not make that choice again. Elena looked past him toward the line of riders, the polished saddles, the royal crest bright against winter gray. And when you fail? Will another village need to teach you humility? Then let me fail where you can see it. Her gaze sharpened. You assume I want to watch. He had no answer. The elderly man stepped forward and placed a weathered hand on Elena's shoulder. Night comes fast here, he said gently. Let the man freeze while he thinks. It may improve him. More laughter followed, softer now. Elena turned toward the cottage steps. At the porch she paused without looking back. There is an empty tool shed by the mill, she said. If the king wishes to stay, he may sleep there like everyone else who arrives asking for shelter. Then she entered the warm light and closed the door, leaving Adrian alone in the snow with hope no larger than a toolshed and infinitely more precious. Night settled over White Mir with clear stars and a hard, honest cold. The toolshed beside the mill had one narrow cot, a cracked basin, and walls that allowed the wind to whisper through every gap in the boards. Adrian Ravenscroft had slept in campaign tents grander than this, yet he had never entered any room with more gratitude. Captain Rowan stood in the doorway holding 2 wool blankets and the expression of a man who no longer recognized his own life. The riders ask if we return at dawn, he said. Adrian removed his gloves slowly. The riders return at dawn. Rowan frowned. Without you? Yes. The court will panic. Then perhaps the court will learn patience. Rowan lowered his voice. You mean to remain here? Adrian looked around the rough little room. For now. As king? Adrian gave a tired half-smile. No one here seems impressed by that. Rowan's stern face nearly softened. He set down the blankets. Then as a man, sire, try not to freeze. By sunrise the royal banners were gone. White Mir noticed, though no one commented. Adrian stepped outside carrying a borrowed bucket and joined the line at the well before dawn. A baker nodded toward another empty pail. Take 2 if you are apologizing properly. Adrian carried both through knee-deep snow without complaint. By noon he had stacked firewood badly, swept the mill floor worse, and nearly lost the contest of stubbornness to a goat belonging to Widow Marin. Children followed him at a safe distance, whispering as though observing an unusual animal. Elena saw all of it from the clinic window where she sorted herbs. She told herself she felt nothing. Yet twice she forgot what she was measuring. On the 3rd day a storm rolled over the lake. Snow came sideways, fierce and blinding, driving villagers indoors before sunset. Elena was fastening shutters when frantic knocking shook the cottage door. The little girl with the knitted rabbit burst inside, cheeks red with cold. Mr. Thomas cannot breathe again. Elena grabbed her satchel at once. Outside, wind clawed at cloaks and erased footprints as quickly as feet could make them. Halfway to the far cottage, a lantern appeared through the white haze. Adrian. He said nothing, only took the heavier bag from her shoulder and shielded the flame with his body as they walked. Inside Thomas's cottage, an older man struggled for breath beside a weak fire. Elena knelt, calm and swift, mixing herbs, warming cloths, counting breaths. Adrian followed every instruction without hesitation. Heat water. Lift him higher. Open the vent. Hold the lamp closer. He obeyed as if command had finally found worthy purpose. An hour later Thomas slept easier, color returning to his face. Relief softened the room. His wife pressed Elena's hands with tears in her eyes, then turned to Adrian. And you, she said, listen better than most husbands. Adrian bowed his head. I am trying to improve. When they stepped back into the storm, the village bell rang once to signal all was well. Snow had piled nearly to their knees. Elena took back her satchel. You did well tonight. Adrian searched her face. That sounds dangerously close to praise. Do not grow arrogant. You still stack wood like a poet. A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. The sound surprised them both. They walked in silence until reaching her porch. Warm light glowed behind the curtains. Adrian remained at the bottom step. Elena. She paused. Yes? He reached into his coat and opened his palm. Resting there lay the plain silver ring she had left behind, polished now, the crescent mark shining faintly in the storm light. I found this in the palace records chamber, he said. It belonged to your mother's line. Elena's breath caught. How did you know? The records named it a moon oath ring. He looked up at her, snow gathering in his dark hair. And they said it was meant for the one who arrived too late and knelt anyway. Then, in the center of the drifting white road, the Alpha King lowered himself onto one knee. Snow drifted around them in slow white spirals, softening rooftops, fences, and the sharp edges of everything except truth. Adrian Ravenscroft remained on one knee in the center of White Mir's road, his gloved hand open, the silver ring resting against his palm like a promise returned too late. Lanterns brightened in nearby windows as villagers quietly gathered behind curtains and doorways. No one wished to miss what humility looked like on a king. Elena Hartwell stood on the porch steps, one hand on the rail, breath unsteady in the cold. For so long she had imagined this man learning regret. She had never imagined being the one asked what came after. Stand up, she said at last. Adrian shook his head once. Not until you decide whether I deserve to. That may take years. Then I have chosen an uncomfortable position. Against her will, the corner of Elena's mouth moved. Adrian saw it, and nearly closed his eyes with gratitude. She descended the steps slowly until she stood before him. Snow gathered on her lashes. You think kneeling repairs what happened? She asked. No, you think finding me erases it? No, then what exactly are you doing here? He looked up at her with none of the distance he once wore like armor. Learning to ask? Instead of take. Learning to stay where I am not praised. Learning that love is not a reward given to power. The village was silent enough to hear the wind move across the lake. Elena studied him for a long moment. The man before her still carried command in every line of his body, but something quieter stood beside it now. Patience. Shame. Hope. Things crowns could not forge. She extended one hand. Then stand beside me, not below me. Adrian rose carefully, as if sudden movement might break the moment. He placed the ring in her palm instead of on her finger. It is yours to keep, he said. Or to throw into the lake. Practical. Elena murmured. The lake is frozen. A small laugh moved through the watching villagers. Adrian glanced toward them. They enjoyed this too much. They earned the right. Elena turned the ring over in her fingers. The crescent mark caught the lantern light. I am not returning to Ravenspire tomorrow. Then neither am I. I am not becoming your answer simply because you finally asked the right question. Then I will keep asking better ones. I do not trust you yet. I know. Some days I may not even like you. That seems almost certain. This time her laugh came freely, bright enough to warm the frozen road. Something in Adrian's chest eased for the first time since choosing night. Elena slipped the ring onto a chain around her neck instead of her hand. This is not forgiveness, she said. It is a beginning. I will take beginnings. She looked toward the cottages, the people who had sheltered her when a palace had not. If you stay, you work. I have noticed. You carry water, split wood, apologize properly, and stop ordering people who are wiser than you. Cruel terms, Adrian said softly. Continue. When spring comes, you will return to the capital and undo what pride built there. With you? Elena met his eyes. If I choose. He bowed his head once. Then I will become a man worth choosing. From somewhere above the clouds, the village bells began to ring though no rope was pulled. Clear notes rolled across the lake, through the trees, and out into the sleeping kingdom beyond. This time no one was afraid. Elena offered Adrian one wool-gloved hand. He took it carefully, like something holy. Together they turned toward the warm cottage light while dawn, still hours away, had already begun.